Tyler Grayson stood in front of his ranch gates, the sun dipping behind the hills, casting long shadows across his land. The peaceful hum of the countryside filled the air, just the way he liked it. His bison, Thunder and Storm, grazed lazily in the pasture, their massive bodies shifting between the tall grasses as they occasionally snorted in contentment. This was his sanctuary, a place he'd fought hard for, a place where he could breathe without the constricting pressure of modern life. For years, he'd been part of this tight-knit neighborhood, a quiet rancher living in harmony with the rules of the Homeowners Association, or HOA. Then the letter arrived. Tyler had thought it was just another of the usual notices, reminders to trim the hedges, keep the lawn immaculate, or some other trivial request. But as he tore open the envelope, the bold, glaring text at the top made his blood run cold. Final warning. Property gate violation. His brow furrowed as he read on. The HOA's latest directive clear and absurd. You are hereby instructed to seal your property gates immediately, effective within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in fines and legal action. Sealing his gates. It made no sense. He had built those gates years ago, long before the HOA had come into existence. He'd consulted with local authorities, followed every regulation, and even made sure the design matched the rustic charm of the neighborhood. Tyler had always respected the HOA's rules, even if some of them were over the top, because he liked peace. But this felt like an attack. Tyler stood at the gates for a moment longer, gazing over his land. There was no way they were going to take away his freedom like this. He reached for his phone and dialed the HOA office. He was ready for a confrontation. Grayson Ranch, how may I assist you? A pleasant voice answered on the other end. It was the same voice he had spoken to a few times before. Yeah, I just got a letter about sealing my gates, Tyler said, his voice tight. Can you explain what this is about? Certainly, the voice responded smoothly. The HOA has reviewed your property and determined that your gates are in violation of our new aesthetic guidelines. We ask that all gates be sealed to preserve the uniformity of the neighborhood. This is a necessary step to maintain property values. Aesthetic guidelines. Tyler repeated, incredulous. You've got to be kidding me. I've lived here for years. The gates have never been a problem. I understand your frustration, Mr. Grayson, the voice said, sounding sympathetic but cold. But these guidelines were voted on by the community and are final. Please take immediate action to seal your gates within the next 30 days to avoid fines. Tyler slammed his phone down, the words ringing in his ears. Aesthetic guidelines. The HOA had crossed a line. He didn't know if it was greed or just an insatiable need for control, but this wasn't a small issue. They were trying to dictate how he lived on his own land. He paced in front of the gates, his fingers itching. The bison looked up at him, sensing his frustration. Tyler made a decision then. He would not let them take his ranch away from him, piece by piece. Not this time, he muttered to the bison, his resolve hardening. The clock was ticking. The HOA was about to get more than they bargained for. 3 days passed. Tyler hadn't sealed the gates. Instead, he walked his property line, eyes narrowed, boots crunching the dry earth beneath him. He could feel the HOA breathing down his neck, like wolves circling a wounded animal. Each morning, he found fresh notices pinned to his mailbox, printed threats disguised as professional correspondence. Non-compliance fine pending. Legal escalation scheduled. Final notification approaching. The language was just vague enough to confuse, just threatening enough to raise his blood pressure. The pressure wasn't just coming from paper. On the fourth morning, 2 white SUVs pulled up to the ranch. Tyler watched from the porch, sipping black coffee from an old enamel mug. Out stepped contractors, clipboard carriers in neon vests, accompanied by Marissa Wells, the icy president of the HOA. With her designer sunglasses, stilettos sinking into the dirt, and clipboard clutched like a weapon, she looked more like a suburban dictator than a community leader. Tyler met her halfway down the driveway. "Morning, Mr. Grayson," Marissa said with a smile so tight it looked stapled on. "We're just here to inspect the gate before our contractor proceeds." "Proceeds with what?" Tyler asked, voice low and sharp. "The ceiling, of course." She held up a glossy pamphlet that looked freshly printed. Page 14, Clause B. Per HOA policy, unauthorized gates must be welded shut to ensure the community's harmony. Tyler gave a slow shake of his head. "You're trespassing." Marissa didn't blink. "Actually, the easement on the outer gate falls under shared community boundary jurisdiction. It's all in the documents you signed when you moved in." Tyler's jaw tightened. She had done her homework. Still, he wasn't about to let them bully him into surrender. "You touched those gates," he said, pointing a finger at the welders, "and you'll wish you hadn't." The contractors hesitated. Marissa stepped forward, voice sugar-coated. "Mr. Grayson, you have 30 days. That's generous. But if we have to file a civil complaint, the legal fees will triple the cost of compliance. Isn't it easier just to follow the rules?" Tyler said nothing. He watched her team take pictures, mark measurements, and discuss welding angles like this was some corporate project, not a man's livelihood. Later that night, Tyler walked along the pasture fence. Thunder and storm were restless. They pressed against the wire, their hulking forms casting enormous silhouettes in the moonlight. Tyler had raised them since they were calves. Now, they were massive creatures with thick skulls, stubborn hearts, and more intelligence than anyone gave them credit for. The clock was ticking. In 26 days, those gates would be sealed, his land cut off, his animals confined like prisoners. But Tyler wasn't planning to just sit back and watch it happen. He stood by the gate, one hand resting on the iron latch, eyes on the sleeping neighborhood just beyond the hill. "They think they're keeping you in," he muttered to the bison. "But maybe we'll show them what happens when they try to cage something wild." The bison snorted in agreement. The countdown had begun. The day the welders returned, the air felt different. Heavier. Charged. Tyler watched from his porch again, arms crossed over his chest. The sun hadn't even cleared the horizon when the same two white SUVs rolled up, kicking dust clouds over his gravel drive. Marissa Wells stepped out first, flanked by 2 HOA board members and a security contractor with a stun baton clipped to his belt, like they expected trouble. This time, they weren't here to talk. Tyler's dogs barked from inside the house as the welding crew approached the gates with their gear. Sparks flew almost immediately as they cut into the hinges. No words, no hesitation. Tyler didn't move. He'd spent the entire night walking his pasture in a storm of restless thoughts. He had reviewed his property deed, called a lawyer friend in town, even checked zoning codes twice. But nothing changed one stubborn fact. The HOA had legally boxed him in with a tangle of fine print and technicalities. But Tyler Grayson didn't fight fire with paperwork. He stepped down from the porch slowly, boots thudding hard against the steps. "Cut the torches," he said, voice loud and sharp. The welders paused. One of them looked to Marissa. "You have no right," she began. "I told you once," Tyler interrupted. "You touch those gates, there'll be consequences. You signed the compliance agreement." She snapped back. "You're in breach. We're enforcing our authority, like it or not." Tyler didn't argue. He walked past them all, calmly unhooked the emergency latch on the side pasture fence, and swung the interior gate wide open. Thunder and Storm were already standing near the edge of the pasture, eyes locked on the commotion. They sensed the tension. Tyler had raised them to be alert, responsive. They didn't hesitate. With a thunderous crack of hooves against dirt, the 2 bison surged forward. The welders scattered first, dropping tools and bolting for their vehicles. Marissa and her board members screamed and ran. Even the security contractor stumbled backward, fumbling for his baton, but wisely choosing not to stand his ground. The massive animals burst through the outer gate before it could be sealed, flattening it like a toy. Then they were gone, off into the well-groomed suburban horizon. Tyler didn't flinch. He turned slowly and looked at Marissa, now trembling behind the passenger door of her SUV. "You locked the gate," he said calmly, "so I opened the fence." Her face was pale with fury. "You just unleashed dangerous animals into a residential neighborhood. You'll be sued. Arrested." "They're not dangerous," he replied coolly. "They're just curious. Big difference." Then he added with a smirk, "Besides, maybe they just needed some fresh landscaping." From beyond the hill came the sound of crashing shrubs, splintering fences, and the distant scream of someone's garden statue meeting its end. The HOA had tried to cage him in. Now the entire neighborhood was about to find out what happened when nature pushed back. And this was just the beginning. By the time the sun reached its peak, the HOA community, once a model of suburban order, was in complete disarray. Thunder and Storm had no concept of property lines, and even less patience for ornamental hedges or solar-lit pathways. The two bison, each weighing over 2,000 pounds, thundered through cul-de-sacs like roaming tanks, snorting, stomping, and trampling everything deemed tasteful landscaping. A pristine koi pond in the miller's backyard exploded in a splash of water and fleeing fish. Patio furniture was sent airborne. Sprinkler systems erupted like geysers. The neighborhood looked like a war zone. Tyler stood at the edge of the main road, arms folded as he watched the distant chaos unfold. He wasn't proud, but he wasn't sorry either. The HOA had tried to wall him in, treat him like a threat just for living differently. They'd forgotten that nature didn't follow board-approved regulations. Cars skidded to halts. Residents screamed and ran. Drones buzzed overhead, filming the destruction. A child yelled, "Cool, real buffalo," before being yanked inside by a terrified parent. Marissa Wells stood in the middle of the HOA's community garden, screaming into her phone, "I don't care what it costs. Get animal control out here now. I want tranquilizers, nets, helicopters, whatever it takes." But animal control wasn't prepared for bison. They sent one truck and 2 officers who had experience corralling stray dogs, not prehistoric tanks with hooves. Thunder flicked one of the officers' tranquilizer darts out of his thick hide like a mosquito bite and kept munching on decorative succulents. Storm barreled straight through the hedge maze the HOA had spent 6 months designing. The whole thing collapsed like a house of cards, right in front of the community clubhouse. Several board members fainted. Marissa's day went from bad to worse. As the destruction continued, her phone buzzed relentlessly. Calls from furious residents, news reporters, even her own husband, who told her their newly installed outdoor kitchen had been turned into a dust pit. Meanwhile, Tyler's phone buzzed too, but for different reasons. Neighbors who had never spoken to him before were now calling with questions, advice, and, surprisingly, sympathy. "Tyler, it's Gabe from 2 streets over," one voicemail said. "Look, I hate what they did to your gate. Honestly, we all do. This has gone too far. You're not the only one they've pushed around." Another, "This is Mandy. My garden's wrecked, but honestly. Good. Marissa's been terrorizing us with fines for years. Maybe this'll make her think twice." Tyler listened to each message with a slow-growing smile. The bison hadn't just trampled lawns. They'd shaken something loose in the neighborhood. Fear. For years, the HOA had ruled with an iron rulebook. But now their perfectly controlled empire was unraveling under muddy hooves and broken garden gnomes. As Storm let out a deep, earth-shaking grunt and rolled in the ruins of a fake grass tennis court, Tyler said to himself, "Didn't want a fight, but they locked the gate and unleashed a stampede." And the herd wasn't done yet. By sunset, the neighborhood looked like it had hosted a parade of Viking berserkers and lost. Broken fences, trampled flower beds, and shattered bird baths littered the streets. Thunder and Storm had retreated to a shady patch under a lone oak in the park, chewing on remnants of someone's award-winning lawn sign. But Tyler knew it wasn't over. He'd expected retaliation, and sure enough, it came faster than he anticipated. Just after dinner, his phone buzzed with a notification, an email from the HOA titled Emergency Board Resolution. He opened it. One line in bold letters blazed across the screen. Grayson Property declared a nuisance. HOA files for emergency injunction. Tyler exhaled slowly, tension gathering behind his eyes. They weren't backing down. If anything, they were doubling their efforts to bury him in bureaucracy. Legal threats, fines, and public shaming. They were throwing the full weight of their suburban regime at him. Within the hour, local news vans pulled up at the neighborhood entrance. Reporters in polished suits delivered breathless coverage of the bison rampage of Brookstone Hills. Aerial footage showed the animals calmly resting, but the anchors spun the tale like it was the next apocalypse. "Residents are terrified," said one reporter dramatically. "The HOA claims a rogue rancher unleashed these beasts as an act of revenge." Tyler watched from his porch, expression unreadable. Then headlights lit up his driveway. A black SUV pulled in, but this wasn't HOA. This was worse. Legal. Out stepped Davis Tolman, the HOA's attorney. Slick hair, sharp suit, and eyes that said, "I charge by the hour, and I like it." "Mr. Grayson," he said, walking up with a thick folder in hand, "you've been served." Tyler took the papers without a word. Inside, an injunction, a restraining order from accessing community common areas, and a cease and desist threatening criminal charges if the bison weren't removed immediately. "Really going all in, aren't you?" Tyler muttered. Davis smiled without warmth. "You escalated. We're responding accordingly. A judge will see it our way." Tyler looked past him, toward the broken gates and the town beyond. "We'll see." Once the lawyer was gone, Tyler sat on his porch and fed scraps to his dogs. Storm bellowed in the distance, and the sound echoed off the hills. They were going to paint him as the villain, frame the chaos as his fault, try to bury him in court filings and force him to sell or surrender. But they'd underestimated the man behind the bison. He wasn't done. Not even close. If they wanted a war, he'd give them one. He had allies now. Neighbors who had tasted freedom, who saw the HOA mask slip. And Tyler had one final card to play. He opened his old metal lockbox, dusted it off, and pulled out a flash drive. Footage. Documents. Secrets. If the HOA wanted to play dirty, they'd better be ready for what he was about to expose. The bison were just the warning shot. The real stampede was coming. 2 days later, the HOA headquarters, the pristine community clubhouse, once reserved for bake sales, watercolor classes, and emergency hedge height reviews, was locked down tight. Marissa Wells paced the main office floor, a bead of sweat forming on her temple. The bison were finally wrangled back to Tyler's ranch after a 3-truck operation involving animal control, a cowboy influencer, and several lawsuits worth of damage claims. But that wasn't what had her nervous now. It was the email. An anonymous tip, a digital thunderclap, sent to every resident of Brookstone Hills. Subject line: "What your HOA doesn't want you to know." Attached were 5 high-definition videos, internal documents, and audio recordings. Tyler had dropped the hammer. The first clip showed Marissa at a board meeting, laughing as she approved a motion to fine a disabled veteran for leaving a wheelchair ramp visible from the street. The second showed her dismissing a mother's plea to install a small swing set, saying, "We're not a trailer park, Rachel." The rest, even worse. Illegal fund reallocation. The HOA had been quietly diverting money from maintenance funds into a board enrichment program. Essentially, vacation stipends, luxury dinners, and cosmetic landscaping for board member homes. But it was the final document that truly ignited the neighborhood. A signed developer contract revealing plans to rezone Tyler's land for luxury condos once the nuisance was forcibly removed. Tyler wasn't just a victim of overreach. He was in the way. The community exploded. Phones rang off the hook. The neighborhood app, normally a place for lost cat sightings and pie recipes, was flooded with furious posts. They tried to steal that man's land. We trusted Marissa. She used us. Grayson's bison are saints compared to this filth. Meanwhile, Tyler sat on his porch, calmly sipping coffee as his phone buzzed with a steady stream of messages. You were right. I'm sorry I didn't stand up sooner. Tell us what to do next. Storm grazed quietly in the pasture, the repaired fence now reinforced with steel and pride. Thunder lounged in a mud pit beside a sign that used to read private property, HOA access only. Now it just said, try me. That evening, an emergency neighborhood meeting was called. Tyler didn't attend, but he didn't need to. The people who once ignored him now chanted his name. The vote was swift, loud, and unanimous. Marissa and the board were removed. Permanently. The HOA's lawyer. Gone. The injunctions. Withdrawn. The nuisance label. Reversed. And then came the final twist. As Marissa tried to sneak out of the clubhouse through the back, she was cornered by a herd of angry residents and one very large bison. Storm snorted once, lowered his head, and gently nudged her Mercedes across the clubhouse lawn. Tyler watched it all on live stream. He smiled, leaned back in his chair, and whispered, "Nature always balances things out." But justice wasn't finished yet, because tomorrow, Tyler had one more surprise planned. And this one would leave a mark they'd never forget. The sun rose over Brookstone Hills, casting light on a community forever changed. The HOA board was no more. Their kingdom of mulch regulations and mailbox color inspections had crumbled overnight. Marissa's mansion sat dark and silent, her once perfect lawn now a muddy canvas of bison tracks and neighborhood outrage. But Tyler Grayson wasn't finished. He stood at the edge of the reclaimed gate that had once been forcibly welded shut. Now, it stood wide open, its iron arms stretched like a welcome sign to a new era. Storm and thunder flanked him, peaceful yet alert. They were no longer invaders. They were symbols. That morning, Tyler hosted something no one had seen in Brookstone Hills before, the ranch revival. He'd invited everyone, and they came. Dozens of neighbors, some curious, others still wearing gardening gloves or clutching coffee mugs, poured through the open gates onto Tyler's property. There were kids with wide eyes, seniors with quiet awe, and even a few former HOA loyalists who looked ashamed but stayed anyway. Tyler stood on a wooden crate in front of the pasture fence. His voice, calm but strong, cut through the breeze. "I didn't move here to fight anyone," he said. "I moved here to live free, to raise my animals, to be part of something real. But somewhere along the line, this place forgot what community means." He paused as thunder gave a soft grunt beside him, as if in agreement. "They tried to wall us off. They tried to push me out. But you know what I learned." He stepped down, walking through the crowd. "You were never really with them. You just needed someone to remind you it's okay to stand up, to push back, to say no when something ain't right." The crowd murmured, nodding, clapping softly. A boy climbed onto the fence post and beamed at the bison. Then Tyler delivered the final blow. "I'm turning this land into something for all of us," he said. "A community farm. Open pastures. Field days for kids. Fresh produce. No fees. No politics. Just shared ground. And if anyone doesn't like it..." He turned to look down the road, where Marissa's empty SUV sat, its hood still dented from Storm's polite shove. "They know where the gate is." Applause broke out, raucous and real. For the first time in years, the neighborhood felt united, not by rules or enforcement, but by shared purpose. Later that day, Tyler and a group of volunteers repainted the sign on the gate. The old private HOA regulation zone was gone. In its place, bold black letters read, "Free range starts here." Storm trotted by and licked the paintbrush out of Tyler's hand. Laughter rippled through the group. Brookstone Hills had been ruled by fine print and fear, but now, the bison weren't the wildest thing about the neighborhood. It was the people, awake, aware, and ready to reclaim the ground under their boots. And the final reckoning was still to come. Weeks passed. What began as a chaotic rebellion had transformed into something unexpected, a movement. Tyler's ranch gates, once symbols of defiance, had become a community hub. Every weekend, families gathered in the pastures for outdoor movie nights, hayrides, and bonfires. Kids learned to plant tomatoes and feed Storm slices of watermelon, while Thunder napped beside the new Freedom Garden, once Marissa's prized topiary plot. But while the spirit of Brookstone Hills had changed, one thing still gnawed at Tyler. The developers. Marissa hadn't acted alone. She was just a tool for something larger, something slicker. Hidden within the leaked documents Tyler had exposed was a clause most people had missed, an option contract from Miller Slate Urban Development, contingent on one condition. Tyler's land had to be deemed commercially viable through forced sale. If the board had succeeded, his ranch would have been bulldozed by winter, turned into a row of boutique condos named the Bison Villas. Ironically, Tyler didn't take that lightly. So, he fought fire with fire. With the help of sympathetic neighbors, some of whom were attorneys, accountants, even former city officials, Tyler filed a land conservation trust. The move shocked Miller Slate. It froze all development rights, permanently protecting the property as agricultural land and open green space. The final twist. Tyler didn't stop there. He acquired a small adjacent plot that had once been earmarked for the HOA's future tennis pavilion. Instead, he repurposed it into something new. The Brookstone Freedom Center, a rustic community lodge built from reclaimed wood and crowned with a weather vane shaped like a charging bison. Inside, he mounted the old HOA rulebook, shredded and framed. Below it, a plaque read, "Let no one fence what nature frees." Marissa was never seen in Brookstone Hills again. Rumor had it she moved to a gated high-rise in Miami, where the HOA board required silence after 7 p.m. and fined residents for balcony plants. Tyler. He became a local legend. His story spread online. The rancher who broke the HOA, garnering millions of views. He was invited to speak on podcasts, morning shows, and even at city council meetings about property rights. But he always returned home by sunset, where Storm and Thunder waited by the fence line, peaceful as ever. One fall evening, as the sky burned orange and gold, Tyler stood on the hill overlooking his land. A group of children ran across the pasture, laughing, dodging bison pies. Free. An elderly neighbor sidled up beside him. "You ever think it'd turn out like this?" Tyler chuckled. "I didn't plan on any of it." The neighbor nodded toward the grazing giants. Funny how it started with 2 animals and a closed gate. Tyler looked out at the horizon, where no fences boxed the land anymore. "Nah," he said. "It started the moment someone thought they could tame what was never theirs." He tipped his hat back and smiled. The bison had flattened the fences, but Tyler Grayson had flattened the future they never saw coming.